take out their power, take out their infrastructure, take out their communications, has a devastating effect.
Welcome to the Cyber Insurance News and Information Podcast. I'm your host and the executive editor of Cyber Insurance News, Martin Hinton. And today we're joined by Michael Crean, Senior Vice President at SonicWall. Michael, first of all, thanks so much for joining us. How's your day been so far?
You know what? It's been a pretty good day. It's actually been a good day, good week. My daughter graduated from high school last week, and so I'm kind of riding the euphoric high still.
Congratulations to her and you and everyone else for that matter. It's a good time of year. You're one of a few people who I've spoken to lately who've been in that situation, college and high school. So yeah, it's something to take a pause and to cherish. I think we don't do that enough. So congratulations, Michael. You joined the United States Army in 1989, and you served for a decade, and then you went into cybersecurity. Now, those may seem like non sequiturs, but they're not. And I wonder whether you might tell me a little about your military background and how it informs and morphed into your, fairly senior role in the cybersecurity world.
I think one of the things, I attributed some of my leadership qualities based solely on what the military taught me, which helped me out a lot when I got out of the military and getting into IT and, in a data center security or a data center role as an operations manager and starting my own company, realizing that leadership has a much younger foundation. And it probably wasn't until much later in life, and I kind of missed the boat with it, that, seeing what my parents were showing me silently. My mom and dad both worked for General Motors. My mom worked a factory line, and she started there in 1967. So could you imagine what working in a factory was like in 1967 in Northeast Ohio? There was no air conditioning. There was definitely heat because it gets really cold up there, but there certainly was no air conditioning when she's standing on that line building electrical harnesses. And what I realized is I never saw her complain about her job. I never heard my dad complaining about his job. Now, they probably did it, but they never did it in a way that my brother and I heard it. And it's something that I think has really influenced me in my ability as a leader here at SonicWall, as a former CEO and founder, and just generally transitioning from, we'll call it the wearing of the green to maybe a little bit more wearing of the blue. No reference to IBM, but I think you know where we're going with this, coming out of the crawling in the dirt a little bit to sitting behind a keyboard and doing certain things. And, so now I give a lot more credit to my parents about what I've transformed into, and the military as well, because I think it just enhanced my abilities to understand what a really bad day looks like. There was a common saying that I used quite frequently when I would have an employee that was having a rough time or just got off a terrible call with somebody, just handing it to them. It's like, here's what I'll remind you is that nobody's going to die today. Nobody's dropping a bomb on you. Nobody's shooting at you. And you're going to get out of your car and turn on your air conditioning, and it's going to be fine. And you're going to sit in this really comfortable environment. And then you're going to spend your 30 to 45 seconds walking into your house that's climate controlled. And when you go to bed tonight, it's going to be a nice, soft, squishy environment that's going to feel great. And that reality, because I've experienced those things, can certainly change how you feel, the words that you're using, and when you start to feel what a bad day can really be, that it's just not as bad as it could be.
I second that. That very few things are as bad as they seem in the moment, and it is maybe a tattoo I need to get because it's hard to remember, isn't it?
It is.
Before we move on to SonicWall and the other broader topics we're going to discuss today, I have spent much of my journalism career in the military space. I spent 6 years doing military history documentaries, and I've done volunteer work with veterans transitioning out of the military. One of the things I'm familiar with is just how many post 9/11 veterans there are and are going to be. And one of the other things I know is that the world of cybersecurity has a talent glut. So I wonder whether you might have a pitch for maybe it's a recent veteran or someone who's still looking for their post-military career path, or someone who's, eyeing their DD 214 and coming to that day. whether there's a pitch for this business and how it's maybe a natural fit or a good transition, or maybe something entirely different that's another challenge that if you've gone through certain things in certain environments, you can meet.
I think that's one thing that the military teaches you. There's probably nothing that you can't do if you're just willing to try. And when I say try, I mean really try. Um, I once had this opportunity to testify on at the Senate, and it was a Senate subcommittee around small to medium businesses and how cybersecurity was affecting them and what was happening. And the gentleman that was on the Senate subcommittee, and I wish I could remember his name, but you know, my memory for names isn't what it once used to be. But
You
he,
make no apologies to me. I was about to call you Bob, so we're good.
there you go. Well, that would be. I might answer just in case. If you do it, we'll be fine. He made the comment to me is that you traded one battlefield for the next. And the reality is, it's true. It's not the battlefield. Like, again, nobody's shooting at you, nobody's dropping bombs on you. Um, and we may not necessarily be saving lives with every one of our actions, but we are saving something that's incredibly important to someone. And so lots of people that join the military have this higher calling of purpose that they want to be of service. They want to give back. They want to take care of those that can't take care of themselves. They want to be a protector to someone. That's what, in my role on the defensive side of what we do in cybersecurity, that's everything that we're about. We're about taking care of those that can't take care of themselves. We're about stopping a threat actor. We're about stopping sometimes a state sponsored threat actor, some nation state that's trying to take advantage of something that they shouldn't be. And who's that line of defense between that end user, that customer, that organization, that business? It has to be people like me. And I think that military members transition into that role easily. And sometimes there's this, well, nobody's going to give me a chance because that's not the skill that I have. I was an infantry guy. I was an Army Ranger. I was a Navy SEAL. I was a paramedic. I was a whatever you did in the military. It does not matter what you did. You don't have those cyber skills, but there's lots of skills that you have that people may not have anything like you. Your ability to think creatively, your ability to take a high stress situation. Some of those things you can't teach. Those are learned behaviors. And, somebody that maybe went into the military when they were 18 and spent 10 years and came out at 28, and somebody else who went to college and got their master's degree that's starting their career in IT, whatever it may be, cyber, like there's so many life lessons that we have to give ourselves credit for, I think, as military members that are incredibly valuable that sometimes we sell ourselves short.
I second that, and I'd like to add that perhaps there's a more practical benefit. Most of America exists in a corporate environment, and coming from a complex corporate style bureaucracy, like a lot of the military can be, you learn how to sort of navigate and survive in a place where maybe the rules don't entirely make sense right away, and that you've got a boss who's not particularly good, and your subordinates who are annoying. Like it's a dynamic environment where the pressure and the purpose and the goal are incredibly important and complicated. And so again, like I said, there are a lot of skill sets that may not be literal on paper that translate well. And to broadly to civilian life. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people because of how few people serve in the military now. I mean, what is it? 1 or 2% of the nation has that exposure, and I think for a lot of us who aren't exposed to it, not myself included, but um, that there is an idea that it's just running around with a gun, and it's so much more than that.
It
there is
is. I
there
mean,
is that, but yeah. So
every deployment has an incredible amount of logistics behind it of how you're going to get there, how you're going to get the supplies you need, how you're going to get the food that you need, how you're going to move through whatever it is to the objective of wherever you're trying to go. Like, there's a lot more to it than just carrying a gun.
you touch on one of my favorite things. I did carpool once with a retired Navy captain who ran logistics during the first Gulf War, and he was the first guy I had a really great conversation with about how everyone hears about the tip of the spear, but it's not there without all the other parts that no one puts on television or writes movies about, or you don't get a lot of books about why the ship is packed the way it is as it arrives in a port, halfway around the world. So yeah, that idea about why things happen the way they do and having purpose that's not always clear, and the unseen is as important as the seen, is another part of it that I think is a lesson that like you said, it's an experience, not something you can teach. Um, so I want to transition now. Just tell me quickly, what does SonicWall do?
So historically, what everybody knows us for is making firewalls because that's what we've been doing for 3+ decades. We've been making really great firewalls that service the small to medium business, large enterprise, government, just about anywhere you can think of. We have firewalls in those locations, those businesses, those ways of life. But a lot has changed. Firewall isn't the only thing anymore. We have security operations centers now. We have MXDR offerings so that managed detection and response capabilities where we can pull in telemetry from just about anything. And it isn't even just about SonicWall anymore because so many people have opportunities to buy lots of different vendors' technology. And sometimes they're looking for the best of breed. And why shouldn't somebody be able to pull all of that telemetry, get all of that data out of these great tools and bring it back to somebody so that they could watch it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we have those. We have our own switching. We have our own wireless access points. We have so much more than just being a firewall company that most people don't even know that we do anymore.
So in that context, let's pivot to sort of the topic of the day is Iran and the threat they possess, not in a traditional military point of view. We all hear about the Strait of Hormuz and drones and exchanges of fire in the Gulf. This is really more about their greater reach. So what does the data actually show us about Iran's capacity in the cyber warfare realm? And I want to take you back to sort of early September when you guys shared some information about what you were seeing and that sort of thing. So walk me through that.
So, I mean, kinetic warfare doesn't stay. It reaches, it goes. I mean, look, one of the things about kinetic warfare, if you go back multiple decades, like what you want to do, you want to take out infrastructure. So you want to knock down communications, you want to take out power, you want to take out those things that make it hard to work and do your job, whether it's, military or government or whatever. You need these things. Well, now it's easy to reach 10,000 miles away and take that kinetic action that used to be contained, localized to where the bombs are being dropped and the bullets are being fired to it no longer stays. I mean, we've already seen it. We saw a large breach of a medical manufacturer company, and that was done by an Iranian backed state sponsored threat actor. And they went in and they shut it down and they encrypted and they took advantage of this organization. And most people think, okay, well, what's the harm? How could that affect me? Yeah, they're a global organization, but there is an interesting number of the amount of procedures that they participate in on an annual basis by the devices that they manufacture. I think, and I could be off on the numbers and I apologize if I'm wrong, but I think it's almost 30,000 procedures a day is what I think the number was. You
I think
know,
the number in my notes is 36,000, but what we're talking about is an enormous number of lives, both
yeah.
the
And if you
patients.
shut down manufacturing just for 10 days, that's 360,000 procedures that somewhere along the way are going to get delayed. So, how do I feel if my mom needs a procedure and this device is no longer available for a period of time until they get manufacturing back up because the supplies have run out? What about the people that they've had to send home? They had to send their entire workforce home from Ireland for days. So this is a huge impact and it was done with purpose. Like this wasn't some Sunday drive by that they were hoping to just catch something. They knew what they were looking for and they took direct action against a company that is US based, that has a global reach, that now caused harm to lots of people and people that would think this could never be about them, but now it is.
Obviously the scale of it, 36,000 procedures a day, multiply that by however many days that they were unable to operate. Do you view that as a low end or a medium? Where does that fit in the scale of what's possible? Obviously, the movies come to mind, but was this a warning shot or a, hey, don't forget we've got this weapon? We're not just going to be able to, close the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to be able to reach you anywhere in the world. Because the truth is, these cyber attacks are, they don't need to respect borders, geography. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the belief, and you could tell me how confident you are that this is a state-backed attack, Iranian state-backed attack, but it's very easy to hide that reality and then make it hard for the ceasefire negotiations to be disrupted by a cyber attack that you can't reliably attribute to the other party. Am I wrong to say any of that? Start with the beginning. So I think I made the mistake I often do of asking three questions in one. How, on the scale of cyber attacks, this is the Stryker attack we're talking about. Where did this fall in the scale of 1 to 10, one being okay and 10 being horrific?
I don't think we are, in just personal opinion, I don't think we see this as horrific. I think the people at Stryker probably see this as horrific. I think the employees feel the pain of this being horrific. An individual that maybe doesn't get the medical procedure that they need that gets impacted by this could see this as horrific. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably putting this at a 7 or 8. You know, it's significant enough. The unfortunate part about this is that our news cycle moves on to the next thing and moves on to the next thing and moves on to the next thing. And now we're a society that consumes information 30 to 45 seconds at a time. And, it's the squirrel. Oh, there's a ball. There's a dog. I'm going on to, whatever it is, we're just moving so fast onto the next piece of information. It would be one of those ones that would be interesting that if you went out on the streets of New York or Washington, D.C. or San Francisco and said, hey, what do you know about Stryker? Most people probably wouldn't even be able to correlate that there was a cyber attack. And it wasn't a little attack, it was big.
Yeah, I want to just layer on top, having been in this field of journalism for a couple of years now. The other challenge is it's not visual. And the example I've been using lately is if
Correct.
the Jaguar Land Rover hack were not a hack, but someone had, burned a factory down, it would have been on the cover of the paper. It would have been, it's visual, it's easy to show, and the digital stuff is vapory. And we know how much information is attained through video now. And if it's not visual, it becomes extremely hard to gain people's attention. And that's another layer in the complexity of both this story or any others in this space where, to illustrate the vapor of the internet that's around us all and we rely on and are desperately in need of to do most of what we do professionally and maybe even personally, it's something that is a real challenge in presenting the danger to this because the Stryker attack is just one example. I mean, this sort of thing. I think when we planned this call, we discussed the two men who, the last I looked, were indicted in Sudan for attacking the early warning system prior to the October 7th attacks in Israel. And this early warning system was designed to alert people that they needed to seek shelter or go somewhere secure. There's a danger out there, and the allegation in the indictment is that because of what they did, more people died and suffered. And so instead of prepping the beach, if you will, with a naval bombardment from a battleship, you turn off the lights, to put it very simply, and it has the same effect of disrupting the lives of the people that you're looking then to attack in the follow-on mission. I mean, what other examples are there out there? I mean, what do you have to say about that one?
I 100% agree with you. It is, it, the unfortunate part is I think we live in this bubble, and maybe not you and I, because this is a part of your job. This is what you're hearing about it every day. Obviously, it is an absolute part of my job, and I'm on the defensive side of this with my teams behind me, and so we are technically seeing it every day, big and small. Well prepared organizations, ill prepared organizations. The unfortunate part is that most people, and there's some good statistics out there, numbers around this today, that most organizations that get hit with ransomware, have business email compromise, they actually find themselves getting hit a second and a third time. because they don't think that they're a target again. And it really makes like these two guys out of Sudan, it takes what, the Iranian state sponsored threat actors are doing. It takes just about any organization out there, whether it's Russia, North Korea, some homegrown, radicalized US citizen that's taking these type of actions. And to your point earlier, it is really hard to prove. Like with confidence, we can absolutely say the Stryker attack was backed by the Iranians. We can say that with confidence. But how do you prove it? How do you put something tangible to it that it gets people's you almost need an emotional response for people to take it serious to then say, well, what do I do? Because I think that is the challenge right now for me that I find with most of these attacks is that people don't see that they have any responsibility. They don't see that they have any means of making a difference, and they can. It's that 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon theory. I mean, look, I have access to things. My brother has access to my mom. My mom has access to me. And if my brother falls for something and then it creeps through to my mom and I'm not paying attention to it, and she sends me an email of like, hey, look at a picture of my dogs. And I'm like, oh, okay, I want to see the picture of mom's dogs. And then I click on it. And then there's something that gets dropped into my system. Like, that's 3 people. That's all it took. So, there's a much bigger responsibility that we have to participate in safeguarding ourselves, which in turn safeguards our nation.
I mean, you make a very good point, and one of the things that I've had conversations recently with people about is that, and the phrase I use is almost a childhood era digital version of look both ways before you cross the street. And I don't know if I mentioned this when we spoke originally, but my niece, who's 11 or 12 and in the public school system here in New York, was telling me about her cybersecurity class or seminar or part of her curriculum. And I thought it was going to be all the traditional, online predator type stuff. And no, she laid into MFA, complex passwords, and then really, really interestingly, she sort of spoke in a almost philosophical terms about remembering that we've put all these things we value into a digital space, and we should protect them like they're anywhere, like they're in a physical space. You lock doors, you lock the second lock on your apartment door if you've got two, and you turn the alarm on. That we don't have that attitude about our digital well-being. Maybe it's because it's abstract, or maybe it's because we didn't realize how vulnerable we are or the value that these things create for other people. The other thing you just said, and it's interesting, the network of we hear about computer networks all the time. Well, those networks connect people, and whether it's a company or a family, the idea. I mean, I recently did a podcast where the cybersecurity CEO I was interviewing talked about how a woman wanted her family to get super fit for her wedding. So she was looking for a gym membership for the family. And she posted it on our Facebook page. And her dad worked at some company that is, a ripe target, had value. And so the hackers targeted her with a fake family gym discount membership. And that was how they got in through her Facebook page, or perhaps it was an Instagram, but some social media posts that became their back door. And that is, it's not easy, but it happens all the time. I guess you described sort of the slow and low energy thing, that there's this sort of, the persistence, particularly now with AI able to send a well written, we don't get the misspellings we used to from the Nigerian princes, and the volume is significant, that it becomes like a numbing kind of thing, like so much email, so many texts, phone calls to your phone, that we sort of, you know tell me about that sort of psychological reality of that sort of slow and low energy kind of assault on us.
I call it the goldfish theory. You know, um, my daughter says to her brother, he's 15, she's called him a goldfish a bunch of times because she feels like he can't remember anything from second to second. And I think that's what this low and slow is. It's a little bit of that idea. Like if you had a goldfish, they're one of the hardest creatures to keep alive. I mean, look, if you've ever gone to a fair and played the ping pong ball in the bowl and you come home with the goldfish, like how hard is it to keep this stupid little thing alive? Um, but if you were to just put a goldfish in a bowl of water And if every day you just turned up the temperature a half a degree, like the goldfish just swims around, living its best life ever until one day that water has gotten so hot they didn't even know that it was hot and they're dead. I mean, that's what this low and slow, it's desensitizing us because it's this constant numbing. I think that, you said it, and I think that's a great way of putting it. It's just this constant numbing and barrage. And if you're forced to deal with, 100 bad things a day, eventually you're going to drop your guard, not intentionally, but you've just got so much you're trying to do so fast. And if you have to get those 100 things right to never click on them, never to answer them, to never anything, you're eventually going to make the mistake. I mean, nobody's that good. But I love what your niece is learning. Like that is powerful information. And whoever put that program in place and whatever they're doing, I hope that that gets replicated in lots of places because, I think about my mom. She's in her 70s. She didn't grow up with computers. There was no such thing when she was a child. This is new to her. And shame on me if I don't impart enough knowledge to her that gets her in trouble. But there isn't a lot of people out there that have a particular set of skills like I have that can educate their moms and their dads that are in that 70s, 80s today.
Yeah, I mean, you touch on something that I'm still trying to wrap my head around is that, passwords are really not secure, and they never really were. Like the whole idea it wasn't like a combination on a lock on your locker in high school or even a key to the door. There is a placebo effect to the password that seems to be lingering, like the idea that you could use the same one in multiple places. That sort of thing is um, what I'm getting to is I was at a conference last week in Columbus, Ohio, and a gentleman in one of the panels I talked to is like, he said, we kind of need to introduce a little more friction at points. We've made everything so efficient. We need some moments where there's friction, and it creates a moment to think, wait a second, should I wire this money to that person? Or, oh, wait a second, I got to double check that new bank account is actually legitimate, as opposed to just sending the money off in a business email compromise scenario. I mean, what do you think about that idea that there is, we've embraced the frictionless reality of internet commerce and the speed and efficiency it's brought to our economy to great benefit, mind you. But there is maybe a price come to be paid here for the next 10 years where we kind of get things sorted and get right, particularly with things like quantum computing coming online. What do you think about that?
I absolutely think we've made things too easy. I mean, and there's some really great things that have come from it. Like, look, who doesn't love a car that will tell you you're about to rear end somebody and it starts applying the brakes for you? One of the best things that I appreciate that lane assist, but where I appreciated it the most is when my youngest daughter started driving and she was commuting every day to school and driving about 30 to 35 minutes. And she was getting on, I live in the Washington, D.C. area. So she was getting on 495 every day, driving around the Beltway, getting on 66, heading into Arlington. And as a young, inexperienced driver, I loved the fact that lane assist is available to keep her in the straight and narrow. But does that make her a good driver? Probably not, because it makes her so dependent on what that technology is doing for her. So yeah, we need some friction points in our life. There's a really cool statement that I heard the other day, and I don't know who said it. I can't remember, and I'll probably get some of it wrong. But there was something about hard times. No, it was something about hard times make hard men. Hard men make easier times. Easy times make weak men, and men, make hard times. And so there's this cycle that we go through. And, I think that kind of applies here is that we've made it too easy. Um, and that causes some of its own issues and challenges.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. I mean, putting it into the threat actor mindset, in addition to that reality and the function of us feeling like we need to do everything immediately and respond to emails very quickly and that sort of thing, there is the added benefit for them. They know everything about behavioral psychology and manipulating people through colors and fonts and, timing of the day and, get people at 4 o'clock on a Friday with an urgent email and they're going to want to deal with it fast so they can get off for the weekend and that kind of thing. We know this all happens. So there are, in some ways, we've supplied the adversary with a pretty good tool shed worth of things to use against us that, at least broadly, we're not defending against. And I say that both on the personal and professional level. You see, even large companies where they don't quite seem to have appreciated the vulnerability and the damage done when you can't do business for 72 hours or even longer. Um, one other thing, setting aside the business part of it, we talked about, you touched on healthcare in the Stryker case, but in the wake of Iran, and there was a lot more attention paid to critical infrastructure, energy, water. We obviously mentioned healthcare, but even financial services, and then government facilities and that sort of thing, like water treatment plants and that kind of thing. I wonder whether you might talk about what you're seeing in that space with regard to. I know that it was April 7th. There was an advisory from the FBI, CISA, and the NSA, specifically naming water and energy. But that part of it, the idea that, and the premise that I've read about, and you can correct me if this is wrong, is that a lot of these systems may have already been infiltrated, not unlike prior to the Normandy landings on June 6th in World War II. We dropped, you know, spies behind the lines, or commandos behind the lines to link up with the French resistance to prepare the defense. That there is more than the landing of the invasion force that goes into us, that there are these things that may be happening, sleeper cells in the digital sense, lying in wait to turn off the power on the West Coast should China ever want to actually invade Taiwan, or some other variation. You could imagine if the power went out. We know what happens when the power goes out, right? Like that's the it's like the holy grail, and we're seeing that pressure naturally now on the electrical grid in America, and talk of maybe we didn't develop it fast enough, or whether or not this reason or that reason doesn't matter. Here we are. So what about critical infrastructure in this space, and where it stands in relation to Iran specifically?
I think that it's a smart target. If you really believe in your country and you're at war with some other country and you can't physically get to them, take down their infrastructure, make their people hurt. You know, we we quote unquote are hurting their people by dropping our bombs and firing our bullets and doing those type of things. Um, you know, who really knows why the internet was shut down in Iran? Like, it came back on recently, but was that because we took it offline? Was that because they took it offline? You know, they will probably claim that they took it offline, but who knows that that's true or if it's not true. But if you really want to hurt somebody, and this goes back to kind of, war fighting 101, take out their power, take out their infrastructure, take out their communications. And taking out the power in this country, has a devastating effect. I mean, think about the problems, and Amazon doesn't have very many outages, but they've had a couple outages where you've seen like you've seen Amazon East take a hit, a couple years ago from a bad line of code put into a router, and the things that you couldn't do in your life. Like, you couldn't place an online order with Starbucks. Like, that's a big deal to some people. How inconvenient. I have to get out of my car and go in the store and talk to somebody and actually converse and tell them what I want, my who knows what ridiculous, you want in your drink because it's not just a black coffee. I mean, all of these things we're so dependent on because, again, it's easy, it's nice. But yeah, I mean, we are definitely at risk. And I do believe when you just look at the facts of where most compromises, when they bring in those digital forensics and incident response team, they find out that they had been in those environments for months and sometimes years prior to executing. I mean, to your point, no differently than D-Day. We were in those countries long before we hit those beaches.
What, in the context of what organization? I mean, so it's fair to say within the public sector, you have a lot of, what's the what like a legacy technology where you've got old bits coupled onto new bits, and you've got protocols where people aren't changing the default passwords on things that they don't quite appreciate have, an entry point into their network. What are some things that civilians should be looking for? I mean, again, if this were ever become a campaign issue for someone, what should be people looking to do? What are these operators? What kinds of things could they be doing now to to make themselves more resilient.
I mean, for me, it's always about the fundamentals. The fundamentals are always the fundamentals, no matter what AI you have in place, no matter what gee whiz, go fast, high speed, low drag technology you put in place. The fundamentals matter, just like in any sport, just like a race car driver. Like there are certain things that they started learning young in their career that they're still practicing even being the best F1 driver that's, won the last 4 or 5 races in a row now. Same thing with a hockey player. Like some of those skating drills are still the skating drills that they're doing today, even though they've been playing for 2 decades. It'd be the same thing. Making sure that you have MFA in place and not just in place because you say it's in place, but truly audited and looked and cared for and making sure that it's on everything. The Colonial Pipeline, that was one that you actually saw a physical effect on the East Coast. And because I live in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., I can remember that day that it was happening. Me and a couple of the guys that I work with, we went to a Washington Capitals game and everything was good and everything was normal. We came home from the Washington Capitals game back to our office, and there's a Sheets across the street. There was a line out of the Sheets, down the road, up the next road of people waiting to get in there to get gas because they were panicking. And all of that because of an account of somebody that didn't work there anymore, that didn't have MFA in place. So good hygiene, MFA, patch management. I understand that it's hard remembering, the 27 different passwords that you need for the 27. Use a good password manager tool. Don't store them in your browser because that's an easy one to take advantage of a hack. Um, and if it doesn't feel right at work, ask the question. Hey, why do we not have security awareness training here? Why is it that I'm allowed to VPN in and there's no MFA? Like, I don't want to be the person that takes the company down. I don't want to be the risk. Hey, I was looking at my computer and it looks like it hasn't been restarted in 784 days. Isn't that a little bit strange? Like, don't computers need to restart to have a patch applied? I mean, these are really simple things that we can all participate in to make a difference. If you're an employee at a company and maybe you don't work in the IT department or the cybersecurity department, you can still be a part of the success. I mean, there's simple, easy things that we can all do. And I think just like your niece, when we start talking about it and we start having conversations with people, then we all become a lot more aware and it doesn't become some dark, dirty conversation of fear of like, oh man, well, am I going to get in trouble if I didn't do this?
You touch on a I wouldn't say pet peeve, but a mantra of mine is that so much of what you do, particularly as biological creatures, is the mundane and boring, right? You have to eat every day, you sleep every day, exercise routinely, bathe, brush your teeth. And if you don't do these sort of dull, kind of chore-like things, you diminish your quality of life. And that same attitude, it seems to me, applies in this space. When you have to change your password every so often, or I've been slowly absorbing every time I get a pass key offer, I'm like, well, yeah, I'll take that. Thank you very much. That idea that there is, like you said, it can feel a bit overwhelming, but it's a bit like if you're getting back into shape and you need to lose 50 pounds, you don't lose it in a day. You don't lose it because you had one salad. You don't lose it because you joined the gym. It takes time. And that persistence and that routine, and then creating perhaps a schedule, take advantage of the tech and put a calendar reminder in. It is it's important. Like, and I think that's where I think that, again, in a go fast kind of world, it's not glamorous, it's not exciting, but it's really, really important. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people. Do you think that that's true both in the sort of business world and the personal world with regard to cybersecurity? That we sort of we shrug our shoulders and we to your teen driver analogy, you think, it won't happen to me. I can drive however I like.
100%. I believe that, and probably more importantly, like we don't even see it as our responsibility. Like, hey, I work in the finance department at company acme.com. It's not my job about the cybersecurity of this company. That's somebody else's job. What do I have to do? It's one of those like, ask not what you can do for, or ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country type statements. Like, Yeah, I mean, I'm not asking you to become a cyber whiz overnight, but I am saying participate. Like, if it looks odd, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, and they were the CEO and founder of a company, and we were talking about that email that comes in from your boss that says, "Hey, I need you to go down and get X number of gift cards, and I can't talk to you right now because I'm busy, and I just really need this done. Appreciate your help." You know, as a former CEO and founder, and in speaking with her as well, it's like I want my employees to question that. I would probably want to give them a bonus if they actually stopped, didn't take the action, came to me and said, "Hey, boss, did you really do this? Is this what you really wanted?" And not just sending another email, but literally picking up the phone, coming to see me, talking to me, interrupting me. It is important that we participate at this level and we become a team at this, because if we're not a team, which we don't seem like we are very well as a society today when it comes to cyber, we are going to continue to lose. And as we continue to lose, the losses are going to get bigger.
Yeah, I mean, and the losses are astronomical. I mean, I know it's the Moby Dick number, and I think the number that gets tossed around is that the global economy lost $10.5 trillion last year to cybercrime. That may be an exaggeration. I'm not 100% sure right off the top of my head how that got accounted for, but let's take 60% off that.
Right?
You know,
It's a lot of
I mean,
money.
it's a. I would bend over to pick it up if I passed it on the street. I dare
I will
say.
tell you, Martin, I like you, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to push you out of my way so that I
Well,
can
well,
pick it up.
well, we could split it. We could split it. so not,
Okay.
there's
Okay.
enough to go
We'll
around.
split it. Well, it'll be a team effort.
I mean, do you, again, like the AI has created this scale now where you can, I was having a conversation the other day with someone. Could you imagine if someone encrypted your iCloud account and you couldn't see any photos you've taken for 25 years? Would you revolute someone $1,000 or, figure out how to buy $1,500 worth of Bitcoin with the help of their help desk, mind you, again, to the point of how organized they are. I think a lot of people would do this and then they would never tell anybody. Do you think a part of the problem here is that so much of this goes unreported? I mean, outside
Absolutely.
healthcare, pardon me, go ahead. Just the public awareness because of the visibility issue.
No, 100%. I think people feel embarrassed. They feel like, hey, I'm smart. I should have never fallen for this. And we continue to give power to this action and allowing other people to get hurt and harmed by it because we don't stand up and say, yeah, they got me. And hey, I want you to know my story because I do see that I'm smart. I do think that I'm intelligent. I do think, but man, their story was so compelling. It looked so real. And their customer service was the best thing that I've ever experienced in my life. And they made it so easy for me to pay them to get my stuff back that they took from me, and they have stolen my data. But they just made it a pleasure. If you can even say that, it's a pleasure to pay for my stuff that you stole from me. But that's their job. And it's big business. And to your point, 60% of that big, gigantic number, yes, you and I can split it. But if somebody else gets in the mix, I'm pushing them out of the.
No, I mean, again, like I think that, I, you know, the volume, the capacity to steal, and the ability to move the money around the world, all these things, it's the scale of it is kind of hard to comprehend. And you throw in the nation state back. We've talked about Iran, but we know that North Korea is heavily involved in it for financial gain. But then the Russians are maybe their motivation, and then the Chinese are maybe a more intellectual property long game sort of player in this. But there are very, very powerful nations that we worry about in a practical sense from a sort of old school combat warfare conflict perspective. But this concern, it escapes the headlines that it deserves, in my opinion. Do you think that's overstating it?
No, it's not overstating it at all. I think it is escaping. I think that, look, I think for even you and I and for our parents, the only way that we ever believed that conflict would affect our lives if somehow this country got invaded. Obviously, a little bit different for me and my family because I joined the military, and anybody that has ever done a deployment, it does affect your lives differently. But then when you think about if we were worried about physical penetration to this company, we've believed that, you know, we're untouchable. Well, 9/11 proved that to not be true. We're not untouchable. And we've seen lots of other actions that have taken place from radicalized people and their attacks and things that have gone on. So we are far from untouchable. But at the same time, this is really hard because it's not tangible. You know, And the more we hide from it, the more we don't share our story and get up in front of people and tell them, because it's a little bit humbling when you have to admit that somebody took advantage of you. It's easier to say somebody broke into my house. It's far easier to say they broke my windows, they kicked in my door, they came in, they stole my jewelry, they stole my whatever, and everybody feels desperately sorry for you. But how often do people look at somebody that had a cyber attack and say, man, I'm really sorry that that happened to you? You know, what can I learn from you so that I can pass that on to somebody else so that they don't have that same thing happen to them? I don't think we do it.
No, you make a very good point, I've read a few studies by firms like yours and firms in your field where they look at the psychological impact on the team that maybe had the employee that clicked the link, or the broad idea that there are uh, a few crimes where the victim still gets blamed, and this is one of them. Where if you
Hmm.
even the training, where I haven't had the corporate style training in a while, where you get the fake email with the fake phishing link, and if you click it you're in trouble. Like that's not that shouldn't be the point. The point should be like, well, so what should I have looked for, and how could I notice this, or whatever it might be. But again, the sophistication around sort of making a website look like it's a bank or a healthcare provider, or the URL is a slightly a reversed character, and these are very very hard things to pick up. The example I often use is, imagine if you were at a David Blaine show or some other high-end magician, and you got brought up onto the stage and they played a trick and they were able to guess your card or pull a coin out of your ear. Thinking you could figure it out in that situation is like thinking you could figure out that you were being the subject of a comprehensive cyber attack as a corporation or as an individual. If they want you, they're going to get you. And that mindset is one where that's why you look both ways when you cross the street. You wear your seatbelt when you drive. It doesn't make it perfectly safe, but it sure increases the likelihood of you surviving something bad happening that's beyond your control, whether in the case of cyber, it's a malicious event like a drunk driver hitting you, or a traffic light suddenly stops working and everyone gets a green light and no one stops, right? So the tech side versus the human reality side. And I think that idea that it needs to become, in the same way we've all embraced these things and carry them around like they're appendages now, we're all basically becoming cyborgs. Well, there's a consequence to that that isn't all positive, as we've seen now with things like mental health in children and the young adults. But it's more than just that. So yeah, it's a that education part of it is comprehensive. I mean, do you think that there is the need for some sort of, and again, it's a bit like, yeah, I remember in the 1970s when there was a drought in New York City and Ed Koch was the mayor. In the public school system in New York, they introduced the idea to children that, when your dad shaves, don't run the water the whole time. Fill the sink and rinse your razor, and then, rinse the sink, and don't have the water running the whole time you shave, for example. And the idea was you take that information home as a child and you, I guess, scold your dad for shaving the way that wastes water. And it was a sort of, I mean, that's a sort of microscopic example, but that more comprehensive idea, that the idea that there is a need to educate people in a very grassroots way about the value of being secure. I mean, I think I'd mentioned to you when we spoke originally that I spent several years doing military history documentaries, and you see during particularly large scale wars, World War II being the great modern example, where loose lips sink ships, and that you worry that the person next to you in a line may be actually a spy for the Nazis, and so you don't talk about what you were doing at the base yesterday, or what ship came into the harbor, how many supplies you offloaded if you're a dock worker in Liverpool. That mentality that there needs to be a sort of broader resilience for all of us, because as you noted with your example with your family, there is this connective tissue where, if, as Archie Norman, the then chairman of Marks and Spencer, said in his parliamentary testimony about their hack, I've got 50,000 employees. I don't think I quite appreciated that if one clicks the wrong thing, whether they're my tech side in India or my retail side in a store in Manchester, you're in. And that reality is one and that applies also to the technical side, right? So the router in your office, if you haven't reset the password on that, half the audience is going, what, routers have passwords? um, But that, like, everything gets sold as easy and working well in tech, and when it doesn't, we scratch our heads and we click to the next video on YouTube and we move on. That we need to add that friction and then embrace the reality that friction's protecting us is kind of what I'm getting at. What do you think about that?
No, I 100% agree. The other thing that I found interesting, and this just happened, I just saw this on 60 Minutes the other day. You're talking about the loose lips sink ships. Did you see the case that the United States government has brought against, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he works in the army, and he was betting on Polymarket, and he was betting, and this is becoming a really big deal. And there was an organization that went out there and started studying this, and they started seeing bubbles of individuals that were winning their bets far more than statistically possible. And I think that what I say, the average, like when you go to Vegas, 3 to 7% is about the average win rate. But they are starting to see on Polymarket that these win rates are like hitting the 80th and 90th percentile. And so that's where we go from this whole loose lips sink ships to, if people are betting on Polymarket and people start to see these win rates, well, how long is it before China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, whatever, starts doing the same analysis that this other company did, and they can start predicting, what that next attack is going to be, when it's going to be, what it might look like, and all because it looks like it might be fun to make some money, and it might be cool to get engaged and but it's people that's using information in ways that they shouldn't be using it. And so, we think it's all cool. We think it's all fun, but it can truly have life and death implications to it.
Well, I mean, you touched on life and death, and the example that the Polymark example, a precursor to that was when suddenly, I forget which news organization it was, they realized that there were U.S. Special Operations units positioned all over the world, and it was because they were broadcasting their location via some version of a fitness tracker. They were registering their runs on Strava or whatever it might be, and suddenly there was a guy doing 2-mile loops in the middle of the desert in Mali where no one realized they were there. So that, like, operational security isn't just the fence, it isn't just the guard at the gate. And I say operational security, it might sound like we're talking about military things. No, this security exists. You think
Mm-mm.
about the IP and the amount of money companies spend to generate new ideas that turn into new products, that turns into new revenue, into new profit. This is the unguarded reality of this. It crosses the spectrum of companies of all size. So I say that because if you're a small business owner, you might think, no, it'll never happen to me. It will, and you're not alone in thinking it won't. Right? There are massive corporations that are sort of, maybe in denial about this reality. As we move toward the end, I want to shift this because obviously we're cyber insurance focused. One of the things we talked about is that the reality of cyber insurance, and we've sort of gone through this now, is the dynamic nature of this threat is extreme.
Hmm.
It's complicated. It's nation state backed. You talked about being able to see past behaviors and then predict new behavior. And one of the things I didn't chime in there was that, well, that's you want to see how AI gets used in cybercrime. That's one of the ways, right? If they know the last 25 passwords you used for Netflix, they're going to be able to figure out based on the pattern there that the likely next 10, and take Netflix and make it your bank or your retirement fund or your healthcare logon app and that kind of thing. Tell me about the sort of the way that cyber insurance is changing. We know that tradition would have been very classic insurance sort of process where you do a questionnaire and you check some boxes and you say I've got MFA, and that's sort of going away now for a more constant, more regular confirmation that you know, hey, I've got an alarm system. Does it work? Is the lock on your door the right kind of lock? To put it in physical terms. What do you see with regard to how this is all affecting the cyber insurance market?
So I think if we go back 10 or 15 years, the actuaries had no idea what they were insuring. I'm an insurance company. I'm going to go ahead and insure it because people are asking me for it. And what they started to realize is that, they didn't know the right questions. They didn't know what they didn't know. And they didn't know that they should have MFA in place. They didn't know that there should be password management in place. They didn't know that there should be some sort of backups. They didn't know that again, we're going to go right back to the fundamentals. Well, the insurance industry, just like the house, it's meant to win. It's meant to cover you, but it's also meant to win, is what it's meant to do. And so now, like you said, there was the questionnaire phase that we went through it, but they found out that people were lying. And now, they're getting to the point where they're getting really smart. And I think it's time. I think it's time that the insurance companies have more. I don't know if I want to say it's not skin in the game, it's teeth in the game, where there's more bite to these policies. Because if you're going to attest that you have done all of these things, then they should be allowed to audit you. They should be allowed to make sure that their business relationship and the investment that you're making in them because of the money that you're paying is well worth it, because the risk is extreme. In some of these cases, you start looking at millions of dollars that they're looking to be compensated for. And the insurance company should know that they're investing in the right customers that are truly participating in the journey and making this a team effort, and not just looking for the easy payment that they gave up the credentials or they didn't do the things that they were supposed to do. I mean, there's two things. Like if anybody listening to this would just do these two things, and I'm not saying it's the end all be all, I'm saying it's just the start to the journey, that if you would just start forcing MFA on every single account, and if you would really keep up with your patches, like there is a 70 some odd percent decrease in the likelihood of you being compromised. Again, no silver bullets, no way to get there till you can have the guarantee that it'll never be compromised. But that's a huge victory. And it's two really simple things. I mean, basic fundamentals. The amount of people that I know that don't use MFA on their Gmail accounts, and then they wonder why it gets taken over, or whatever. I mean, I will tell you, it's like the one that has always frustrated me, and I don't know if they do it today. I haven't really checked, but it was Disney. My Disney account got hacked about 5 years ago. And the only reason I found out is because I go to log on to it one day, or my son goes, he's like, I don't know what this language is. I had no idea what the language is, but whoever had taken it over had changed the default language out of English to French. And here I am with me and my Google trying to figure out what it is so that I could get into the account to change it back to English so I could start resetting things. Um, and I will say, 100% attributed to strong password, no MFA, but there was no MFA to be had because they weren't supporting it. So, if the insurance industry will say that you're 70 something percent better by doing these two things, it's mundane, it's simple, it's easy, but it actually works and it makes sense. So why not do it?
Yeah, I mean, you touch on a key reality. For all we talk about tech and digital and cybersecurity, I think that it's fair to say roughly 90% of cyber attacks come down to human error of some kind. And
It does.
that, not just like any risk can't be entirely remediated. You're not going to make everything safe. You're never going to be able to get in your car and think, no, nothing will ever happen. We do have that expectation with tech that we should be able to make it perfect and everything should work exactly the way it should. That doesn't happen. I just want to remind everyone how many OS updates their iPhone has had in the last 2 years, right? It's like they're constantly improving. Bug fix is the greatest euphemism ever, in my opinion, right? But do embrace the update, for the record. So yeah, no, I think that you make a really good point. I mean, we've been talking about an hour, so I just wanted to put one question to you, and we've sort of touched on this, but I wonder whether now that we've had a chance to sort of go through some of the topics we've got, if you, to your point about testifying before a Senate subcommittee, if you were to put yourself in a chair or have the privilege of addressing people who are in a position to pass a law or create a regulation that helps improve the situation, what are one or two things that you think were the highlights? I mean, maybe you just touched on it, but maybe you didn't.
Oh man, that's tough. I mean, I think that and I don't know how you put a law around this, but it comes down to personal responsibility. It Nobody's responsible for me but me. And, I believe that I'm the leader that leads from the front. I'm never going to ask somebody to do something that I'm either one, not willing to do myself, or two, I haven't done 842 times already and showed you that I'm willing to participate in this. If you think it's going to affect you, then, you know, go out there and do something about it. It was as my daughter has turned 18 and these opportunities to vote and having some of these times to educate her, it's like, hey, here's where I'm going to respect you more than anything when we're talking about this. If you want to make a difference, then take the time to show up and cast your vote because one vote matters because one becomes two, two becomes four, four becomes eight. And that's how change starts to take place. So, stop looking for somebody to do it for you. And I mean, look, between ChatGPT and Copilot and Claude, if you went into any of them and you said, help me be more cybersecurity aware, help me secure my life. Can you give me 3 easy things to do? Or even just put it in Google for all that matters, because it'll pull out some AI engine and it'll give you the probably same things. These are things that we can do. And I think once we as a society are doing some of these things, then it becomes easier maybe to demand or ask our state, local, and federal governments to do more to help secure us because we're doing our part first. And now it's easier for us to meet in the middle.
Well, I mean, what you said just now reminds me of the famous line, we get the leaders we deserve. And if we prove that we deserve better leaders because we're behaving properly and in whatever respect, then it would stand to reason that we get the leaders we deserve. So I agree with you. And I think that's the thing. There's a lot you can do on a company level, on a small business level, on a personal level to make yourself more secure. The tools are there. They're free, and you just have to avail yourself of them. And maybe depending on where you are, password wise, you've got some remediation to do. Like there's that feature in the iPhone now where it tells you these passwords are repeated and that kind
Mhm.
of thing. Knock off 2 tonight as you're sitting on the couch, just 2 of them, like that's it, like just 2 a day. And again, to your point, the slow, steady creep of greater security comes like getting back into shape or learning a new skill, right? Nothing happens overnight. Slow, steady pressure leads to a better circumstance. So yeah, I think that's really sound advice. So
And
is
those
there anything
actions
else
just become muscle memory at the end of the day.
yeah,
If you
and
start doing it today, by the time you get a couple months down the road, you won't be thinking about it anymore because it'll just be a part of your everyday life.
yeah, make it routine. Yeah, no, you make a good point. So is there anything we didn't get to that you'd like to discuss or anything else you'd like to say?
I think this is something that we can change. This is something that we can make positive impact on if it's important to us and rely on your subject matter experts. I mean, look, I think anybody that hears this that probably is in IT probably has had the experience at Christmas time where somebody got a new piece of tech and the first thing your mom, your aunt, your uncle, your kid, whomever is calling you saying, hey, can you help me get this set up? Well, if you're in a position of having that much knowledge and experience, then proactively have the conversation with your mom, your dad, your sister, your cousin, your kid, your niece, your aunt, well, whoever it may be, your friend at work, the guy you get your hair cut by, the lady who does your hair at the salon, whomever it may be. Share that information so that we can all work better to keep one another safe. Because this is a team effort. This is not an individual sport.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, Michael Crean, Senior Vice President with SonicWall, thank you so very much for the time today. We really, really enjoyed the conversation. Um, and if we don't have anything else to say, I will say thank you again.
Thank you,
Um,
sir.
Everyone else, thank you so much for watching. We've mentioned a few things. There'll be some links in the show notes as well as a way to find Michael and SonicWall down there. And with that, I'm Martin Hinton, the Executive Editor of Cyber Insurance News and Information. Thank you so much for watching and taking the time out of your day. Enjoy the rest of it.